All right, with OS4 being in beta and going back, I've seen questions about what's all in OS4, and basically OS4 has kind of been evolving since the beginning. And big thanks to Frederick for all the work on this. I've been collaborating with him, and just kind of he's taken a lot of input, taken a lot of the basic ideas, and just made them 10 times better. But I wanted to just do a video that actually kind of goes over the main stuff that's coming in OS4. And there's so much. I can't possibly cover it all. It's technically, even though the previous versions of ProffieOS always had unlimited capabilities, now it's kind of taking unlimited capabilities and adding it with and multiplying it by unlimited capabilities to get to this new OS. And it's just anything you can think of at this point. I think is possible. I wanted to start with the basics. So the start point for me for OS4, or what came to be OS4, was the concept of responsive controls. And this is a super simple blade, but with what the responsive controls and all the new responsive effects, they basically take into account the angle of your blade, which I can show here. So there's a blue dot in the middle of this blade. As I move this blade up, you'll see that blue dot will shift, and it's in real time. It's based on the angle of the blade, and it's very smooth because it's continuously updating. So that blue dot is responding to the angle of the blade, and it goes through the full motion based on the angle of the blade. So that's the primary concept between blade angle. Now, in addition to that, there's also a twist angle, which is your z-axis. So I'm going to put that blue dot in the middle, and if I turn my hilt, I can actually increase the size of that blue dot, or I can shrink the size of that blue dot, and hopefully the camera's picking it up. So the z-axis, or the twist control, now also can control what's happening on the blade. So you combine the ability to use the twist control with the ability to use the blade angle, and that's the basis for the responsive effects. Now, in addition to size and location on the blade, there's also another use for these. And these are all super simple. So this starting point is just to kind of give you the baseline foundation of everything that's in OS4 regarding the responsive controls. So on this style, this one uses twist control, but in addition to location on the blade and also size of an effect, the twist control or the blade angle can also control the colors. So this is just a red to a blue mix, but as I turn the hilt, I'm changing between the two, and it moves it's a very smooth real-time transition. So this isn't color change. This style has two colors in it, and it's mixed using the z-axis, or the twist angle of the blade. So just by turning my hilt, I can go pure red, and then if I keep turning, it'll go to a purple mix, and it'll get more and more blue until I get to pure blue. So that's the other. So you got location of an effect, size of an effect, and then color of an effect can all be controlled now in real time using the z-axis, the twist angle, or the location of the blade in terms of blade angle. So this one doesn't have blade angle on it. All right, so that's the foundation for the responsive controls. So now, what we've done is there's a number of effects that take advantage of this. And this will be, again, this is going to be kind of more of a simple blade. This one's from my library, so it's just a red audio flicker, nothing major on it. But now you take the concept of the blade angle and the twist angle, being able to control all these parts of the blade and all these effects on the blade, and you're able to get stuff like this. So there's going to be a full suite of responsive effects. So the first is responsive blast. So what responsive blast is the angle of the blade now determines where that blast is. So in the past, when you did blast, it was a randomized location on the blade. Now, instead of being random, it's actually going to stay based on the angle of your blade. So as you change the angle of your blade, that blast location will change. And there's a number of different blast effects, but this concept behind responsive is the same. Instead of randomizing, now the angle of your blade as you use it gives you control where that blast is. So it's more of an immersive kind of blast effect. Now similarly with clash, the clash location is also going to be based on the angle of your blade. And again, instead of being randomized, it's actually the angle of your blade is going to be where your clash occurs, and that's using responsive clash. Now, I tied responsive clash to the responsive lockup, because if you're clashing with somebody, eventually you're going to get to that lockup point. So I'm going to set my blade here. That's where my clash is. Now, if I go into lockup, that's where my lockup is. Now, the localized lockup for responsive now moves, again, based on the angle of your blade. So if you move defensively, it'll slide down. So as you come towards you, it slides down the blade. As you move offensively, it will slide up the blade. And it gives you control over that. So in the past, the localized lockup, when I designed it, would have an animation to kind of give a similar effect. That's not needed anymore. Now with the responsive controls using that blade angle, you're actually able to control where that lockup is. And then in addition, we also now using the twist control for drag. So let me get this on camera. So the drag size now, oops, hard to hold there. So the drag size, you'll see, if I turn my hilt, I can control the size of it. And that's on responsive drag. So the size of that drag area is controlled just by turning your hilt. And then with OS4 now, we've got two new effects added in. So the first is lightning block. So lightning block was in the fork. This is a new version of lightning block that we've added to OS4. It has its own sound capability, so you can use begin LB, LB, and end LB, which is lightning block, if you want separate effects. Otherwise, it uses lockup. But now lightning block is part of OS4, and lightning block is meant to be like it sounds. You're blocking a force lightning attack. So now this one, for the responsive version, it has two controls on it, and I'll show them. So it has a baseline animation that's going to run just to give you that lightning effect. So that's your baseline animation. Now, with the responsive lightning block, if you turn your hilt, you can actually change the intensity. So that's increasing the intensity of that lightning, or I can decrease it. And then the second control is using blade angle. So you see it's dancing all over the blade right now, and it is randomized, but if I bring my blade upright, as soon as I get to about that spot and up, it forces the lightning into the center of the blade as if you were focusing that attack. And it just gives you that level of control. It's meant to be random, it's lightning, but by bringing your blade up, you can focus that attack, and then by turning your hilt, you're actually able to also still continue to change the intensity level. And the intensity is the size of those lightning hits, so you can go larger or smaller just by turning your hilt. So you get the lightning block animation, but you also get that kind of immersion where you're controlling how intense it is by turning your hilt, and also you're able to focus it by bringing that hilt up. So that's the responsive lightning block. And then another new effect in OS4 is melt. And that's meant off the Qui-Gon Jinn scene in episode 1 when he's cutting through the blast door. And what the melt does is it lets you heat up a surface, and then turning your hilt will actually increase the temperature or decrease the temperature of that surface. So I'll demonstrate it here. So it goes from a yellow, which would be hotter, and just by turning my hilt I can get orange or red out of it. And it also increases the size of it, so it just makes it look more like you're actually heating that material up. So that's the responsive melt. So those are just the new responsive effects in terms of what's possible. And then you take those responsive controls and you apply them to styles, and what's possible is just going to keep growing. So in addition to all of the responsive controls, there's also a lot of new effects and capabilities in OS4. So I'm going to kind of touch on them, but again, there's just so much. But let's go. So what you're seeing now, that's the passive battery monitor, and that's it's basically an effect. There's different versions, and a lot of what you're seeing here is in my library. So because there's so much involved, I've built my library to contain kind of like roadmaps for everything, but it's just the starting point. There's so much more you're going to be able to do. So let me go back into that one actually. So this passive battery monitor set on font change. So when I first change the font, I just get a quick preview of my current battery. And what it is it'll be green for full, it'll be a yellow when it's halfway, and it'll go red when it's dim. And the idea behind it is instead of dedicating a whole style or having to go into a menu, when you change presets, you can quickly see where your battery's at. And this way, before you go use it. There's versions where you can do it on retraction. There's a version for boot. But the idea behind it is just kind of give you a quick visual cue where your battery's at. but that's something I've added to the library, and it's using several of the new effects. So you have the effect boot if you want it on boot. You have the effect new font, which would be on the font change like this one. So there's new controls for all that in OS4, but that's just one of the new concepts. Now, another one is going to be the new Preon effects, and you've probably seen this all over Facebook because I think it's cool and a lot of people are already playing with it. So the idea for the Preon effects is Preon existed previously, but it was a sound file. Now you can actually set a transition up for Preon. So this one here I call overload. There's a number I've already designed in the library, and I'm sure people are going to come up with more and more because that's part of the fun of Proffie. But so what happens with the Preon is your effect will last as long as your Preon file. If you don't have a Preon file, obviously you won't get this. So you're going to want Preon files for these particular effects. This one was provided to me by Jesse Kirkbride, just for building and demoing and testing. And I know a bunch of guys are putting their own ones together. So I'm going to power up. So this is overload. So during that Preon sound, I'm getting this overload effect where it's building up power. And when the Preon sound ends, the blade ignites. Now there's also some power-up effects and all that in there, again from the library. But with the Preon effects, you can do some kind of animation, and it doesn't just have to be here. You could do it full blade wherever you want. But you do an animation that's timed to that sound file, and you can just get new effects. And then, in addition to the new Preon effects, I've been working on this. It's a new force boost, I'm calling it. So what happens is when I go into, when I use the force now, I can actually have it affect the blade. In the past it was just a sound effect. Now you can actually do, so this one has a white force boost. So what happens is when I use the force, I'm going to get a white blade. Now this is timed for 30 seconds. So for 30 seconds I get this white blade as if I have a force power activated. And then after 30 seconds this will go back. And I have different versions. There's some that give you a swing bright. There's some that give you a color swing, some that give you kind of an unstable audio flicker. This is just going pure white once I use the force, and then after 30 seconds, which should be coming up just about now, this will then go back to regular. And you can do anything you want. So that was just a simple effect. That was just turning a regular blade white for 30 seconds once you use the force, and you can use it as often as you like. So you use your force effect, you get a visual force effect on your blade, and it can be what you want, and then you just go about it. So the idea being almost like a video game. You can just get an enhancement on your blade using the force. So that's another new, Effect Force has been around for a while, but that's just a new one I've added to my library. And I've got a bunch of different ones. I've got a Force Aura, I've got Force Swing Boost, and a couple others. And then, so all that now is going to be in OS4. And then, again, passive battery monitor. Another thing, and this has been around, but now within my OS4 library, is I've created enhancements and customization. And what that is, if you go to the library, and I'll have the link in the description, you can pick the base styles. And for a number of base styles, what I've done, instead of having to create like different versions with power up, without power up, with the force boost without it, with passive battery monitor, with all the emitter effects that are possible, everything else, I've actually made the library so you pick the base one, and then you'll get a screen that'll let you customize it, and the customization screen will keep growing. So it's a start point now. It has a lot in there, but as I come up with new ideas, as I kind of think through stuff, I have a list of stuff I want to play with. I'll just keep adding to it. And the idea is, I give you the base blade, you pick what you want it to do, and then you get that style. And then if you want to change that style still, you can still go in and make all your changes to timings, to colors, etc. But so this one here is a base blade, but instead of using regular ignition, I've actually chose the TR color cycle, and that's that color cycle up and color cycle down. And again, you can change your timings, but now you're not stuck with the same ignition every time. You can choose as an enhancement what type of ignition you want to do. So again, this one has a power up built in with a color cycle up, and then it has a power down with a color cycle down. So there's just a lot you can do with the new library in terms of enhancements and playing with stuff. And then, actually let me go back. I forgot one other thing. So this is again that Preon effect. So, and then the last piece, and again, the laundry, it's almost too long, I'm forgetting everything. The other new capability I'd say that I want to bring attention to for OS4 is a new color wheel variation. So in OS 3.9, the color wheel was introduced, and that lets you change color just by entering a menu and then turning your hilt. But with the default version in OS 9, it would change every color of the blade. So if you had a different color blast, if you had a different color clash, you would end up changing those effects. And for effects like in my blades with like melt, obviously I want it to always stay that yellow, orange, red mix. I don't want to change my base blade and all of a sudden end up with a blue melt, because the idea is that's supposed to be a heating up of a surface. It wouldn't look right. So the new color wheel variation lets you choose which colors in your style you want to change with the color wheel. In the past it would just do all of them. So this is, I'll just go into it. So you go into your color wheel and it only changes the base blade. So it works the same as the default color wheel, but now it's something you can define in your style. And it just lets you go through. So you have color change, and pretty much every style in the library will have the default color wheel, except for the ones like Pull to the Darkness, Redemption, the Koran Horn. Those, obviously, I use color change defined to do a specific action. But any other style in my library now is going to have the color wheel built in. And I have 8 default colors. And you'll see those. I have a few other specific colors that you can check out. But if you're not happy with them and you don't feel like going in and editing the style, you can also use the color wheel variation to then pick whatever color you want. And then you can keep that. And if you use save state or save color, it'll save it on your presets. But so the color wheel is another new capability, or the color wheel variation is a new capability for OS4. Battery's getting lower. That turned yellow on me. So I've been doing a lot of tests. So that's the other nice thing about that passive battery monitor. I don't have to go look for it. It just tells me that, hey, I'm already getting yellow there, so your battery's already getting halfway. Time to think about charging it. So now these are 2 new styles that I just added to the library. I have put them on Facebook so that they may have been seen before. But these are basically, it's a real flame color with a fully responsive fire effect. So this first one, it's got a yellow to orange to red gradient color on the flame, but using the responsive controls for this one, as I move the blade up, the fire will pick up speed and intensity. So as that's pointing straight up, the fire is going to be at its most intense. And then again, because blade angle can control a number of things, as I move this blade down, that fire will start slowing. And it's, again, real time. So you move quickly, it responds. You move slowly, it responds. And then this new real flame, in addition to this color gradient, as you turn this blade down, not only is it going to slow, it's actually going to start to shrink. So this fire now becomes much smaller, and you'll see the colors kind of change in response to that. So the idea is, if you had a real torch, that flame would start, if it's facing down, starts feeding back on itself, so it would shrink. And then just by moving it, and again, it responds to every little angle change, you'll see that fire extend back out, pick up speed, the colors stay in line with it. And now the real flame, the fire control real flame effects, they have limitations on some of the effects, so that, if I have like a blast, obviously the blast I want it's still responsive, but then if I turn this guy all the way down and I have a really small blade, I don't want the blast happening in the black area. So this already has the controls in place so that blast will stay within that flame. So some of the effects are changed on purpose to deal with this, but they're already handled in the actual blade style. But so this is the blade control version of Real Flame. And then I also created a version with a twist control. So this version, this will respond to the angle of the blade just like the other one. So it'll also do the same thing. But now, even when this one's upright, if you turn your hilt almost like a dial, you can actually still shrink that flame. So it just gives you a little added control if you wanted. So this one has a twist control added to it, where it not only responds to the angle of the blade, but you can also turn that fire down just by rotating your hilt. So that's up on the library as well. So there's so much more, and there's stuff that hasn't even been thought of yet that is probably possible with ProffieOS4. But I wanted to kind of get a video where everything's brought together, because this has been over, a period of weeks and a couple months that this stuff's been coming out. And now it's at the point where it's all together. It's all getting pretty well tested. Beta is pretty stable. There's a few pieces that still just need somebody to peek at them. And then once Frederick's happy with it, we'll go from beta to full release. But if you haven't jumped into OS4 yet and you want to play around with it, it's stable. Go to the TRA forum for the ProffieOS4 beta. You can download that zip. I have my library if you want to grab existing styles and play with them. There's a lot of changes to structure, which I'll have to cover in a totally different video. But there's now layers available, which make the blade style simpler, and it actually adds some efficiency. And there's a lot of other changes that you can't see in terms of shrinking the amount of space that styles take up. So Frederick's done a ton of work on all that as well. So you should also see more you should be able to fit more presets on your board using OS4. So just lots and lots of changes, lots and lots of new features and functions. To me, I think a lot of this is just game changing for what's possible with the sabers now. So hopefully you all get in there, play around with it, and just enjoy. So definitely more to come, but I just wanted to kind of catch everybody up, because I know OS4 is moving, or Proffie itself is just moving at light speed, and you go away for a couple weeks, you come back, and you don't know where everything's at. So for those of you who didn't know what OS4 was, or only had a kind of a glimpse, hopefully this gives you a little bit more understanding. So lots more to come. Enjoy.